I'd like to call this meeting of your Newark City Council to order. Holly, please call the roll.
Mr. Bub?
Here.
Mr. Koss?
Here.
Mrs. Floyd? Here. Mr. Frazier?
Here.
Ms. Hall?
Here.
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Marmee?
Present.
Mr. Rath?
Here.
Mr. Roletta?
Here.
And Mr. Blake?
Here.
We have 9 present this evening. Mr. Johnson is on his way, but he'll be just a little bit late. So next we have the invocation by Mrs. Floyd, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Would you bow your heads, please? Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wonderful time of year. And we ask that you be with those people who have less than many of us do. Be with those who are ill in a time when most people are happy. We ask that you be with us tonight as we make decisions for the city. It's the end of the year and there's lots going on for most of us. So be with us during this busy time. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mrs. Floyd. Next we have caucus. That's a chance for council to discuss anything that's pertinent to the agenda tonight.
I appreciate that.
And again, Mr. Johnson should be here. Next we have the minutes of the December 5th, 2016 council meeting. Is there a motion to approve those? Motion by Mr. Rath.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Thank you. We have an appointment this evening. Mayor Hall reappointing Andrew Morrison to the Newark Community Improvement Corporation, the CIC, known as the Newark Development Partners. His 3-year term will begin January 1, 2017 and expire December 31st, 2019.
Any question? That's a reappointment. Him and his family run Buckeye Winery, and that will be his 3rd term on the board, as they typically do, most of them, and he wanted to serve that. So anyway, that's a reappointment.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Thank you. Also, we have Mayor Hall appointing Candy Engel to the Etna Corporate Park Joint Economic Development Zone 2, ECP JEDZ Board. Her term begins immediately and ends October 19th, 2018.
That is, there are 6 members on that board. JEDZ 1 and JEDZ 2 aren't exactly the same, can be, but aren't necessarily. JEDZ 2 is 6 members, 3 of which are appointed by Etna Township trustees, and they have done that, and 3 are appointed here. The desire is to have 1 from the city, which is Mark Motter, 1 from the county, which is Sue Spiker, and then 1 from the, as a recommendation of Southwest Licking School District, and that is Candy. They submitted her name, the principal out, the superintendent out there, Robert Janelle, and she sits on the school board out there at Southwest Licking Schools. All those parties are recipients of some of that distribution money, so that's kind of why that formula works that way. So that would be the 3rd and final appointment from this area. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. That passes 9-0. Next, we have reports of 2 standing committees, 1 from Finance and 1 from Service. Without objection, those will be received and filed. Under reports from city officials, we have 1 from our city auditor, Stephen Johnson, announcing that the government finance officers of the United States and Canada have awarded the city's auditor office the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting. The certificate is awarded to entities whose financial statement meet the GOFA's high standard for reporting and represent transparency and clarity in accounting practices. This is the highest award in government financial reporting and is the 24th year the City Auditor's Office has received this honor. So not only are you getting honors from the United States, but also from Canada. So congratulations, Mr.
Very
Johnson.
good.
Thank you.
I think that's a nice round of applause.
Say anything?
I just want to thank everybody in the United States, those in Canada,
that voted for you, or was part of the Electoral College.
I'd like to thank everybody.
Next from our city auditor, Mr. Johnson, we have an operating report for the period ending November 30th, 2016. And from our city income tax administrator, Barb Jobs, we have an income tax revenue report for a period ending November 30th, 2016. Without objection, all those will be received and filed. Next on the agenda this evening, we have comments from citizens. There's 2 chances for you to comment. This is really not a debate with council. This is just an opportunity for you to be heard. Do we have anybody for this first section? If you just raise your hand, I'll recognize you. Yes, sir. Wow.
David Doney, 231 John Reese Parkway, Pataskala, Ohio. As you may have read or heard on our radio station, the Action Club of Licking County was chartered on September 1st of this year. It's a collaborative effort between Newark Kiwanis, Granville Kiwanis, and the Heath Mound Builders Kiwanis Clubs and Licking County Board of Developmental Disabilities. It's a family, one of the family clubs of Kiwanis, and it's specifically for folks with developmental disabilities, adults with developmental disabilities. They've been meeting since September 1st, had about 15 to 20 folks have come to these meetings. They've already done some great things in the community. They wrote veterans cards that were delivered on Veterans Day to veterans in the community. They just had a recent pie sale where they've raised funds to be able to do some things in the community. The reason I'm here is last Monday was the charter party for the club, even though it was chartered on September 1st. By the time we could get all the clubs together and schedules, we had our party there, and Mayor Hall, the Licking County Commissioners, Granville Mayor, and Heath Mayor Mark Johns issued a proclamation claiming September 1st, 2016 as Action Club Day of Licking County. So I wanted to personally thank Mayor Hall. We have a thank you card from Newark Kiwanis and thank him for the proclamation. You'd be happy to know that William, who's not here tonight, I was hoping he'd be here, is one of the board of directors. Don, he's learned well from you. He's very long-winded, so he's come to these meetings long enough that he got it down the path. So I just wanted to thank again the mayor publicly for his support and for the proclamation. Thank you.
What was that? Tell me the name of the club.
It's called the Action Club of Licking County.
It's spelled A-K-T-I-O-N.
Thank you. Anyone else for this first section? Okay. Now we'll go on to ordinances on the second reading. I'm just going to have you read 16-43 because I know it's tabled, but why don't we have you read it, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Ordinance 16-43 by Mr. Blake, Mr. Frazier, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Koss, Mr. Murray, Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Rath. An ordinance declaring certain improvements to parcels of real property in the city of Newark, which are necessary for further development of the Baker-Evans project to be for public purpose, describing the public infrastructure improvements to be made to directly benefit the respective parcels, authorizing agreements with the respective property owners affected by such public infrastructure improvements, and with the Newark City School District and the Career and Technology Education Centers of Licking County, establishing the Baker-Evans Tax Increment Equivalent Fund and declaring an emergency.
1643 has been tabled.
Mr. President,
Mr. Blake?
make a motion to bring off the table ordinance 1643.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Blake, second by Mrs. Floyd. Is there any discussion on, there's no discussion on taking off the table. Let's vote. Autumn, please call the roll.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Koss?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Roletta?
Yes.
And Mr. Blake?
Yes.
16-43 has been taken off the table. Mr. Blake?
Mr. President, at this time I want to move to amend ordinance 1643. You have ordinance 1643A in your packets, and that would be the offered amendment.
Is there a
I'll second it.
Second by Mrs. Floyd. Is there any discussion on 16-43A?
Mr. President.
Mr. Blake?
Due to the work of Director Motter, who has kindly reminded me before the meeting that months of work has gone into this TIF discussion with Newark City Schools and other entities, just want to read a little paragraph that he's provided to all of us. This TIF, this amendment that's before you, is a 10-year, 75% TIF. The TIF does not require school board action approval according to the Ohio Revised Code. This TIF will be a 10-year and expected to generate about $1 to $1.5 million, and that will be applied towards public infrastructure improvements for the Evans-Baker Boulevard project. Again, the school districts and other agencies will continue to receive the same amounts as when the Meyer was in business, plus 25% of their allowable tax millage portion of improved costs. The school board is not resistant to this amended TIF, and all parties, Newark City School Superintendent Doug Ute has sent a letter supportive of this
legislation. And so we just want to publicly thank Director Motter, Director Rhodes, and the other cabinet members who worked so hard on this, and hope members of council will be supportive.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Any other discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, I'll please call the roll to amend 16-43 to 16-43A.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Roletta?
Yes.
And Mr. Blake?
Yes.
16-43 has been amended to 16-43A.
Mr. President.
Mr. Blake.
Move to adopt 1643A.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Blake, second by Mr. Frazier. Any discussion on the amended 16-43A?
Mr. President,
Mr. Frazier.
I'm pretty excited for this tip to go forward. It was pretty disheartening the first time it came across, but we're really looking forward to connecting Sharon Valley Road and 21st Street, and hopefully sooner rather than later. So I'm just in full support of this and look forward to the future of Newark.
Thanks, Mr. Frazier. Mr. Marmee?
Just a point of order, that motion was not necessary. It was already on the table. There was already a movement before it was tabled. Once it comes off the table, it's then ready.
Ready. So, but we have to do 16-43, the amended version. We have to vote on the amended version.
Correct.
Anyone else? Okay, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Roletta?
Yes.
And Mr. Blake?
Yes.
16-43A passes 9-0. Next, we have resolutions on the first reading, 16-01.
Resolution 16-101 by Mr. Rath, Mr. Cost, Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Floyd, and Mr. Marmee. The resolution for the project that consists of resurfacing, curb repair, and spot pavement repair to North 21st Street from Granville Road to State Route 13 lying in the city limits of Newark and declaring an emergency.
You've heard the first reading is 16-101 and it is an emergency. What did you wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 16-101.
Motion. Motion by Mr. Rath, second by Mr. Cost. Is there any discussion on 16-101?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath?
this is put into an emergency clause because of timelines imposed on us by ODOT.
Any other discussion on 16-101? Seeing none, I'll please call the roll vote.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Roletta?
Yes.
And Mr. Blake?
Yes.
16-101 passes 9-0. Next, we have 16-102.
Resolution 16-102 by Mr. Marmee, Mrs. Floyd, Mr. Cost, and Mr. Johnson. A resolution appropriating and disappropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
Mr. Marmee?
Thank you, Mr. President. Make a motion to waive the 2-day reading rule on Resolution 16-102.
Motion by Mr. Marmee to waive the 2-day reading rule, second by Mrs. Floyd. Mr. Marmee?
Yes, there are things that need to be expedited on this to mainly take care of the end of the year balancing.
Thank you, Mr. Marmee. I'll please call the roll with the 2-day reading rule.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Roletta?
Yes.
And Mr. Blake?
Yes.
2-day reading rule has been waived. Mr. Marmee?
Thank you, Mr. President. Make a motion to adopt Resolution 16-102.
Motion by Mr. Marmee, second by Mrs. Floyd. Is there any discussion on 16-102?
Mr. President,
Mr. Marmee?
I'm talking to Jackie in the auditor's office. We need to amend $1 amount because it changed since the meeting. So I'd like to make a motion to amend Section 2, the dollar amount to be $5,104.57.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Marmee to amend the dollar amount to $5,104, second by Mrs. Floyd, so it's down about $35.
Correct.
Oh, it's already changed. Okay. Motion and a second to amend. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll please call the roll to amend 16-102.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Koss,
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Murmy?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Roletta?
Yes.
And Mr. Blake?
Yes.
16-102 has been amended. Let's see, we've got a motion second, so we have the amendment. Is there any discussion on the amended 16-102? Please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Koss,
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Murmy?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Roletta?
Yes.
And Mr. Blake?
Yes.
16-102 as amended passes 9-0. And finally tonight we have 16-103.
Resolution 16-103 by Mr. Rath, Mr. Koss, Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Floyd, and Mr. Marmee. The resolution cooperating with ODOT for the project that consists of addition of a turn lane at the State Route 16 eastbound off-ramp at the Church Street exit ramp, Ramp C, Ramp 45054, lying within the city of Newark.
And 16-103 will be held for a second reading. And that concludes our legislation this evening. Now is our second opportunity for comments from citizens. Do we have anybody? Sir? Just come out and give us your name and address for the record.
Tim Theodoro, 235 English Avenue, Newark, Ohio. I guess I just have a concern about an article I read in the Advocate this last week about the road work that's coming for 21st Street between Granville and Mount Vernon Avenue. I was wondering if, because I live, as I said, on English Avenue, and Pearson Boulevard is just ridiculously pothole-ridden and full of patchwork, so I was wondering, if there's funding to do that, why can't we just, focus on the streets that, like Pearson Boulevard, that actually need it? And my second concern is Pearson Drive and that new Kroger right there. Sometimes it is difficult to, I don't know if an engineering study was done or what, but it's difficult to turn onto 21st Street from Pearson Drive with that new Kroger being there. So I don't know if they could put a signal there or something for people who need to turn left. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone from the administration this evening? Our award-winning auditor, Mr. Johnson.
Pass.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Honorable Law Director Sassen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will pass.
Thank you, Director Sassen. Mayor Hall.
A couple quick items. Newark Youth Council, and Jeremy might mention it, visited Salvation Army this past week, and just reminds us of how much work they do, especially this time of year, but year-round. But they are recipient. There were more than 800 motorcycles in the Toys for Tots run this year, and so they're distributing all that, and at the same time, food delivery and then warm shelter during these nights. So they do some great things in the community, as do a lot of our nonprofits, but it reminds us of this, especially this time of year. On Saturday, our great Newark Police Department did have a food drive up on the north end of town and collected an enormous amount of food for the food pantry along with some dollars. And we have about a one-year veteran in the police department that headed that up in Officer Beach that did a great job. So kudos to him. And finally, on Saturday, Wreaths Across America was held at the Cedar Hill Cemetery. And while all that weather was going on, and just maybe to remind you, that happened at noon, but that morning they had a burial in that weather, believe it or not, and how hard that department works. But this year we had a record wreath. 585 wreaths were placed that morning, or that noon, in veterans' graves throughout Cedar Hill. It's the only cemetery in Lincoln County that does this, so if you ever have a chance, you go there and see it. It's quite a view. Some on the top side and a lot on the bottom side. With that, I pass.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Buck.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Sir, it looks like Director Rhodes maybe addressed some of your concerns. With this upcoming budget, it looks like we're going to have some more money to do some paving. What was voted on, what you were talking about, was it's a pretty good deal for the city with a match with ODOT for what we could get done. I think it was like $1.2 million. We only had to put about $200,000 in and out of the license plate permissive tax, so it was kind of a deal you couldn't really pass up. But I think your concerns are well heard, and we're going to have more money to pave this year. So I appreciate that, and I agree with you. Thank you. I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Budd. Mr. Cost?
Just wish everyone a Merry Christmas and I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Cost. Mrs. Floyd?
Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Frazier?
Mr. President,
Mr. Frazier.
so I wanted to touch base about the Dunkin' at Newark events that are coming up this week. The 22nd from 3 to 9. It's going to be at Newark High School, and then also on the 29th from 8 to 11 at 31 West, there'll be a concert for Dunkin'.
What time is that?
The Newark High School one? The second one is from 8 to 11 at 31 West. The first one is from 3 to 9 at Newark High School on the 22nd. And so, as everybody on council knows, but the audience might not be aware, a 22-year-old Newark High School graduate lost his life at the University of Akron. A couple weeks ago, he was stabbed by a roommate, and it's been a very big tragedy. There was a memorial service today at Denison, as well as a candlelight vigil last week at Cherry Valley Elementary. And it just puts everything in perspective with Christmas, how precious life is and how we should really care for one another. And it puts a lot of the other things into perspective as being trivial and not important. So thank you for the opportunity to serve with all of you, and Merry Christmas, and God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Ms. Hall?
Yeah, I'd like to wish everybody a happy holiday and be safe. And with that, I'll pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Mr. Marmon?
Thank you, Mr. President. I need to call a Finance Committee meeting for next Tuesday. What did it say? 27th.
27th.
Congratulate Dave. Very good. I'm glad that that's all working out. Appreciate that and your efforts. I'm sure that knowing you, you had a lot to do with that. So, thank you. Steve, if there's an award out there, your group is going to get it. Congratulations. And I can tell you not only the awards, but just working with your team through this budget process that we're starting to go through and everything, they're just phenomenal. They get right on top of things. They know where things are. If they don't know the answer off the top of their head, they know where to look for them and get them right back to me. And I'm sure you're already aware of that, but it's also good to hear that those of us that are your customers really appreciate what they do, because they do get us some information and they explain it very well.
Thank you.
And I'm going to comment. I'm going to kind of echo what Mr. Budd said about the paving, and that the other thing is if there's a pothole, I urge everybody go on See, Click, and Fix on the website. If you do that, it's quicker than any other method. And the potholes get patched up, or at least or this time of year, we're putting a cold patch in there, at least get temporarily fixed until we can get the hot patches in there maybe later on, or paving. As far as the traffic light on Pearson, I'm going to just be completely honest, it's probably not going to happen. The traffic light's on the other side. There's one traffic light there. That side is just, you're talking about over on 21st Street, correct?
Yeah, make it a lot.
Okay. Yeah. My advice is just go over to where the traffic light is, because it's down on the other end of the, what I call the horseshoe there. And that we can't put too many traffic lights, and we put another traffic light that close to the next one that's at the next light, it's just going to create a bottleneck. It would be worse than what you would actually want, because you would never get out of there because there would constantly be traffic backed up there. We learned that on Mount Vernon Road when we had those two traffic lights that were too close together. So, and then finally, I just want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas. And hopefully you enjoy the time with loved ones. And I know I'm looking forward to spending it with my family. And even though, I know Mr. Rhodes probably doesn't want to hear this, but it's always nice if there's snow on Christmas Eve. So, and with that, I pass.
Thank you, Mr. Marmon. Autumn, please call the roll for Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Johnson?
President.
And Mr. Johnson, we're at miscellaneous, and it's your turn. How did today go? How about that?
It's been a really busy day today. Well, I wanted to comment. I went to Wreaths Across America on Saturday. It was not the nicest day in the world, but it is really a wonderful tribute to our veterans. Of course, they don't know it, but for the families, they know that people care enough to remember what they did for us. And I just think it's an extremely impressive kind of ceremony, and I hope next year they can get more wreaths to be able to put more of them on. And across the country, people don't always know about this kind of program. And I think it's something that's very, very worthwhile. And I wish everyone a Merry Christmas and see you next time.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Rapp?
Thank you. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and echo what Mr. Johnson said. The Wreaths Across America needs to be publicized much more. I really didn't hear much about it other than what's been talked about tonight. And I know a friend of mine in Nebraska participated in that. But other than that, I really didn't hear about it from in any other source. So it'd be nice if that were publicized a little bit more. So I think I already said Merry Christmas at House Service Committee meeting, and with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Rath. Mr. Roletta?
Thank you, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Roletta. Mr. Blake?
Thank you, Mr. President. There was a nice article about a young officer, Beach, related to the Cram the Cruiser effort and getting donations up at the new Kroger. So we all hopefully read that article about that young officer. But something I'd like Director Baum to know is that there's a new block watch that started over on Harris Avenue, Idlewild, over in that neighborhood area. And Officer Beach came to that meeting, and everyone left very impressed, and they were very thrilled to have him involved with the block watch. So please know that I said that publicly, and I'm not just hiding things. So he could have those congratulations. I do want to sort of echo what the mayor was related to, speaking to earlier about our youth council, because after we visited the Salvation Army, we got an email from one of the members. It was Caroline Fry, and she was just, she expresses that she was amazed to learn about the Salvation Army. She's always been interested in the charity work that they do, but after the tour, she's realized just how much they really do, and it was just absolutely incredible. She was inspired by the visit, and she's hoping to contribute more of her own time to volunteer there and to give back. So sometimes some of our youth council tours are a little shy on attendance, but I think we are making an impact, and I'm glad that we have that partnership to continue to do that. Lastly, I do want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and extend an invitation, because tomorrow night you could come to the South Newark Civic Association Meeting House, and we have caroling. So if you don't have to be a professional singer, we're not going to vote you off or anything like that. But if you want to come and sing Jingle Bells and Rudolph and Frosty, feel free to come at 5:30 tomorrow night. It's at 429 Ohio Street, and we wish to see all of your lovely voices and faces. With that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. I think you have to be able to sing at least something, right, before you show up.
You can sing whatever you like. Just come along.
Watermelon.
Yeah. Yeah, really. Just a few odds and ends here. Just a reminder, City Hall will be closed for Christmas on Friday the 23rd and Monday the 26th. Our next committee meeting, we have a Finance Committee meeting, will be the 27th, next Tuesday at 5:30. Following that committee meeting, there'll be a special council meeting to discuss the budget right when that meeting is over. And also, our next full council meeting will be January 3rd. City Hall will be closed the 2nd for the holiday. So our next full council meeting will be 7 o'clock in this room on January 3rd. I'd just like to add my holiday wishes and say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Hope you all have a great holiday. So our motion adjourned. Motion by Mr. Koss, second by Mr. Rapp. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Close same sign. We're adjourned.